Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another video and today's topic is this. Something seems mighty fishy. I don't know about you, but many times when I start researching one thing, I will find something else in that research that makes me want to continue on researching through another branch. And this is definitely one of those cases that it has me thinking. So it started with a commenter that left a comment on my video about Eusebius and his comments on Zechariah 14 verses 1 and 2. And so I'm just going to go over with you these comments because you're going to see how I got to the point where I decided to even look into this in the beginning, or to begin with. And I want to say this is not something that I have extensively looked into. It's just been something I've been thinking about, for a few hours now. But I like to share things with you as I'm coming across them because a lot of times you in the comments, you leave me such good information. So the commenter said, which came upon them after the coming of Christ. I don't see how this proves your point. 40 years after the death of Christ, Jerusalem fell to the Romans. The Jews were not wiped out totally then. In fact, 65 years later, they tried one more failed revolt against Rome. Please post the relevant passage from Eusebius or a link to it. Thanks. And I replied and said, after the destruction of the temple, all of the genealogical records were destroyed. The Jews had no way to trace their lineage, which was a very important part of their culture. Then someone else replied and said, you realize kings of Israel a few generations after King David didn't even know what tribe they came from, right? 70 AD meant nothing in that regard, let alone by the time of Nehemiah and then to Jesus' time. We have the Bible and that's it. Everything else is oral tradition, aka leaven. And I'm going to show you a verse that shows that is outright incorrect. Okay, and then I just replied, the genealogical records were very, very important to the Jews because only those from the tribe of Levi could be priests. And then that person replied, this is Genghis Khan, you didn't respond. I don't know what that means. I did respond, but anyway, 800 plus years before Jesus, actual kings of Israel didn't even know their tribe. That's not true. What we have, John the Baptist's dad with verifiable lineage aside from Jesus. Paul is obviously a half-breed because he knew of some Benjamite ancestry on his mother's side, but foreigner Pharisee on father's side. There isn't any evidence of widespread knowledge of ancestral lineage. They were largely mixed with the nations. And then this is my last reply. They determined their lineage through the father's side. I stand by what I said. Their lineage was extremely important to them. How else would they be divided by tribe as they were told to do? You can look this up. The information is there. And then I just shared a link that I'll be showing you. But first of all, before that, let's just go to see what DuckDuckGo has to say about this. And I just typed in, as you can see, were Jewish genealogical records destroyed in AD 70? Because this person is saying that they made no difference, that wasn't important to them. Yes, Jewish genealogical records were largely destroyed when the Romans destroyed the temple in Jerusalem in AD 70, which included the archives that contained these records. As a result, it is now impossible for modern Jews to trace their ancestry back to ancient times with certainty. And this is the link that I shared with him or her. I'm just going to say him. And it's from Ezra 2, verses 59 to 63. And it says, the following were those who came up from Tel Melah, Tel Harsha, Cherub, Adan, and Immer, though they could not prove their fathers' houses or their descent, whether they belonged to Israel, the sons of Delaiah, the sons of Tobiah, and the sons of Nekoda, 652. Also of the sons of the priests, the sons of Hebeah, the sons of Hakaz, and the sons of Barzillai, who had taken a wife from the daughters of Barzillai the Gileadite, and was called by their name. These sought their registration among those enrolled in the genealogies, but they were not found there, and so they were excluded from the priesthood as unclean. The governor told them that they were not to partake of the holy food until there should be a priest to consult Urim and Thummim. So, yes, these genealogical records were very, very, very important to the Jews. So then after some more digging, I found this. And this says, yes, ancient Jews recorded their tribal lineage in written records like the Hebrew Bible. But many of these detailed records were lost after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. While most tribal affiliations were lost, some groups, especially the priestly and Levitical lines, Kohanim and Levium, and certain families from the tribe of Judah have maintained and passed down records, which can be evidenced by surnames and oral traditions. Now, here are the written records. Biblical accounts, books such as Genesis, Chronicles, and Ezra is the one that I just shared with you, and Nehemiah contain detailed genealogies that were important for establishing lineage. Loss of records. The Roman destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD led to the loss of many of these records. Then it continued. Priests and Levites. Due to their distinct roles, the lineage of priests, Kohanim, and Levites have been more consistently preserved. Many Ashkenazi Jews with the surnames Cohen or Levi are descendants of these groups. That is very, very interesting, considering that the Ashkenazi Jews come from mainly Eastern Europe. Oral traditions. Even after the destruction of the records, oral traditions and family stories were used to pass down genealogical information. And then it says descendants of Judah. Some families, particularly those who trace their lineage back to King David, have maintained detailed family trees, often passed down through generations. Now, this is very important to think about because in the passage that I just read to you from Ezra, these men came and they tried to, where am I even going? Going through everything. These men, they came and they tried to say who they were. They sought their registration among those enrolled in the genealogies, but they were not found there. So they were coming to them with their oral traditions, and they were excluded because they were not found in the genealogies, and they were found to be unclean or excluded from the priesthood as unclean. Why? Because they were not in the genealogies. Even though they came to them with their oral tradition, with what has been passed down in their family, since they were not there in the genealogy, they could not be proven as being a part of that tribe. Yet, that is how the people like these Ashkenazi Jews are trying to say that they are of the tribe of Levi, is they are doing this through oral tradition, which was rejected in the Tanakh. So I looked into it a little bit more and I just typed in, as you can see, Ashkenazi Levite. And it says here, Ashkenazi Levites are Jewish males who claim, that's important, that's an important word, claim, cannot be proven. They claim descent from the tribes of Levi and are part of the Ashkenazi Jewish community, which primarily emerged in Central and Eastern Europe. So the men in Ezra, they were claiming their descent as well, and they were rejected as being unclean from the priesthood. But today we have people who are claiming descent from the tribe of Levi, and it's not being questioned. Then if you continue, it says they make up about 4% of the Ashkenazi population and are distinguished by specific Y chromosome haplogroups, particularly R1A1A, indicating a Middle Eastern origin. And that is fine, but having Middle Eastern origin does not automatically make you a descendant of Levi and hence fit for the priesthood, right? And the way that these things have been changed fits right in with the creation of the Talmud after the destruction of the temple in AD 70. Because what is being practiced as Judaism today is not biblical Judaism. It is Talmudic Judaism. Because biblical Judaism ceased to be able to be practiced the way that God commanded it to be once the temple was destroyed. That was the whole point. But the men, men, and I don't mean men as in only males, I'm talking about men as in mankind, they love to play God and they love to take things into their own hands. So once that temple was destroyed, Judaism was then changed into a Talmudic Judaism. So what is being followed today is a man-made form of Judaism. And, if we look at how people are now saying that the Ashkenazi are descendants of the Levites based on, their oral tradition, that goes directly against how things were done in the Old Testament. Maybe it's okay with Talmudic Judaism. It certainly wasn't okay with biblical Judaism. And so to me, I could be wrong. What this points to is this is being used as preparation for, you always hear about them saying they're going to build the third temple soon. The third temple is going to be built soon, and they're going to reinstate sacrifices, and they're going to reinstate circumcisions, even though the Bible doesn't say anything about those things. Okay, because that would nullify everything that Jesus has done for us. But you still have people saying that's what's going to happen. And who are they going to need to present these sacrifices? They're going to need a priest. According to biblical Judaism, it had to be a descendant of Aaron. The high priest had to be a Levite. And so since there are no genealogical records to prove who anyone is, you now have people saying who they are based on oral tradition, which I'm going to repeat, goes against how they did things in the Old Testament. So for me, this is just being used. This is being accepted so that they can just bring someone in as the high priest, if this would ever happen. Now, if this would ever happen, which Jesus is the third temple, and we as believers, we are the living stones. Okay, so we are also part of that temple. The Bible never talks about a third physical temple being built. And if people try to bring up the Old Testament and say and leave those verses about a temple being built, yes, it was talking about the Herodic temple, which was built, and then it was destroyed. So that's what those verses were referring to, not a third physical temple, 2,000 plus years later. There are no New Testament verses about a temple being built. But we know, as we see from the Talmud and as we see from how the Ashkenazi Jews and others possibly are, that they like to change things. And now they're using oral tradition. Men, as in mankind, likes to take things into their own hands. And so if there would be a third temple built ever, it would not have anything to do with Bible prophecy. It would be an example of rebellion against God for sure, but it would have nothing to do with biblical prophecy. It would be completely ordained by man and by man alone. Now, I'm going to just close this with a reading from, I believe this was Josephus who wrote this, and this is about Phineas or Phineas, I'm not really sure how to say it, ben Samuel. And this is what it says about him. And this is regarding the siege of Jerusalem and the temple that was still standing at that point in time, but it was shortly after this event that the temple was destroyed. But it says, in order to see how far their power, actually, I'm just going to read to you the whole thing. Phineas ben Samuel was the last Jewish high priest, the 83rd since Aaron. He was from the, quote, tribe of Eliakim, priestly order Jachin, and did not originate from one of the 6 families from whom high priests had traditionally been chosen. So already going against what they're supposed to be doing. He was a leader of revolutionary forces and died during the destruction of Herod's temple in 70 AD. In order to see how far their power extended, the Zealots undertook to dispose of the high priesthood by casting lots for it, whereas, as we have said already, it was to descend by succession in a family. The pretense they made for this strange attempt was an ancient practice, while they said that of old it was determined by lot, but in truth it was no better than a dissolution of an undeniable law, and a cunning contrivance to seize upon the government, derived from those that presumed to appoint governors as they themselves pleased. Hereupon they sent for one of the pontifical tribes, which is called Eliakim, and cast lots which of it should be the high priest. By fortune the lot so fell as to demonstrate their iniquity after the plainest manner. For it fell upon one whose name was Phinehas, the son of Samuel, of the village Aphtha. He was a man not only unworthy of the high priesthood, but that did not well know what the high priesthood was. Such a mere rustic was he. Yet did they hale this man without his own consent out of the country, as if they were acting a play upon the stage, and adorned him with a counterfeit thee. They also put upon him the sacred garments, and upon every occasion instructed him what he was to do. This horrid piece of wickedness was sport and pastime with them, but occasioned the other priests, who at a distance saw their law made a jest of, to shed tears and sorely lament the dissolution of such a sacred dignity. And so that actually came from Josephus in the Jewish War. And so what you see happened is these zealots, they decided to call these people in from this one family line. They had them pull lots, and it just so happened that their iniquity was going to be made known because the least qualified, even though none of them were qualified, the least qualified of them all, one who didn't even know what the high priesthood was chosen by lot to be the high priest. So these zealots continued against his will to dress him up as a high priest and to haul him off to the temple, place him in the temple, and they, the zealots, who had such contempt for this temple, they were the ones that were telling him what to do. Meanwhile, you still had these other priests who still loved the law the way that it was supposed to be practiced, and from a distance they saw what was happening, and they shed tears and sorely lamented the dissolution of such a sacred dignity. Now, there are many, many people who believe that it is very possible that this is what was being referred to as the abomination of desolation. Okay, so anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to become a channel member, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.